doing DeFi, greatest in the world, and they finally about to see why. What you know about XRD? I'm smart money, I ain't never on a decline. What you know about NFTs? It's not just Ace, when you finally gonna realize you need scalability, need more utility, then you better call on these guys. I'm going radical, I'm going Radix, I'm going radical, I'm going Radix. Hyperspeed DeFi, never on a decline, building the future, I feel like a savage.
Hello and welcome. I am Piers Ridyard, CEO of RDX Works, a core developer of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. This is our podcast, The DeFi Download, a show about decentralized finance and all things crypto, where we dive into the details of the projects, assets, and services that are powering the DeFi revolution. Today, I'm joined by John, Senior Advisor to the Umbrella Protocol, and Philippe, Partnerships and BD Manager. Umbrella is a community-owned, decentralized data oracle to power anything from DeFi to decentralized applications more broadly. Umbrella does all of this at incredible scale and incredibly low cost. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Piers, for having us. Great to be here.
Very well.
Thanks a lot.
So, let's start off with a little bit of a challenging question, right? So, Chainlink is already in the market. Chainlink's already a big oracle. Why does the market need another oracle service? What can't we get with Chainlink?
That's a great question. I think in some ways it's the reason why we're around and we kind of started. One of the challenges that exists today is the fact that while there is some data, there are some price feeds that are being offered. It's limited, and limited both in terms of scale and also limited in terms of diversity. So if an application on chain wants the price feed of Bitcoin or Ethereum, USDT, or any of the, kind of top 50 coins, you can probably get it via Chainlink or, there's some kind of a relatively accessible manner to get it. But if you want, let's say, the entire S&P 500, you want specific data around health or sports or weather and at scale, all of a sudden it becomes challenging for a multitude of reasons. It's partly because the way that most oracles write data on chain today is in a linear or sequential fashion. So if I want, let's say, going back to the S&P 500, if I want all, 500 stocks, what happens today is each one is a separate price feed, or which means each one gets written to chain separately as an individual transaction. And if you're looking to get that on chain on, let's say, a layer one like Ethereum, where transaction costs are very high, it becomes incredibly prohibitive to do something where you need a lot of data, or you need a lot of data that is needs to be frequently updated. And that's where we are able to provide a solution where, mainly because our data is aggregated first before it's written on chain. So it could be 50 pieces of data, it could be 500,000 pieces of data. All of it is aggregated into a single root hash, which is then written onto the layer one blockchain. Partly also because we're a layer two solution. So all of this is processed a layer two on our side chain, which allows us to do it quickly and efficiently and securely, and then written onto whichever layer one blockchain that we support.
So you're taking a more mature approach to writing data on a public ledger. You're basically going, well, instead of putting all of this data on the ledger itself, which makes it cumbersome and like at the end of the day, public ledgers are relatively expensive databases. Even if they're incredibly scalable systems, you're still paying for consensus. There's still a cost behind that. So what you guys are saying is that let's write the data to a layer two, and let's instead have a way of proving what the data on the layer two by anchoring that proof on the layer one via something like what you're saying is a root hash, a root hash for the Merkle tree for the data. Okay. So, but now what you have as an application, as an application developer, if you're a dApp and you want to build an application, Now you have to integrate this sort of this layer 2 to be able to get the actual original data out. So how's a developer, when they're thinking about, using something like this where it is a lot cheaper, how do they think about actually integrating that data from the layer 2 into their application on something like Ethereum or Radix or any other layer 1?
So initially when we first launched, there was a little bit more coding that would be required for that, decentralized application, where they would have to, pull the data. They have to actually, do some, verification of the proof against the, essentially the Merkle root hash that was written onto the layer 1. And then from there, they can then know that this is a verifiably truthful piece of information that they can then utilize for whatever, application or purpose that they need for their dApp. But over the last 6 to 9 months, as we got some feedback from some of the, I guess, alpha testers of our solution, one of the things that came around was just, even though we had what some saw was a more effective solution for getting scale data on chain, there was some friction involved in actually extracting that data and then verifying it. We've since developed a solution that we call Passport, which now allows us to directly deliver that data into the dApps smart contract, so that they don't now need to do the proof verification and all those things, which, to be perfectly frank, is something that, since this is our core competency, we could probably do in a more effective way internally as a solution than to have every single dApp have to create custom code to call the information, to do the verification, etc.
So let me unpack that, make sure I understand it, just read it back to you. So what you're saying is you have a huge amount of data that you're writing to a layer 2, and this can be basically expanded as much as you want. There's sort of no limitation to how much data you can write in there. You're anchoring back those data rights to a layer 1 to make sure that you have a proof that data is, it hasn't been changed, won't be changed, that was actually the data that was written at the time it was. You then have a second system, which is a parsing system, which has a DeFi application. Let's say that I've built a simple oracle, and the oracle allows people to do derivative trades between each other on the S&P 500. And one particular derivatives trade wants to know an ongoing minute-by-minute price of the, let's say, Apple's stock, right? And so what you have then is you have a little parser that is going between the layer 2 back to the layer 1 to write specifically into that contract the data feed that particular application wants, while still having this verifiable chain of data as to being able to go, well, I can prove that this data is correct because I have the root hash on the layer 1, and I have pulled the data that is verifiable against that root hash from the layer 2 back into this application to give it the block by block information it specifically wants without unloading huge amounts of information on top of that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So by doing that, it kind of lowers the friction that the decentralized app needs to do in terms of specific customized code to do all the verification. Our Passport solution now brings that quote unquote, I guess, in-house to do, so that way all the dApp needs to do is kind of essentially receive the verified singular or multiple pieces of data that they need specifically for their application delivered to their smart contract, that they now can get at scale, and also at a significantly lower cost, particularly if that data is something that again is not like the top 25 pairs and things that are quote unquote the most commonly used stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the problems that you see in the market often is adding the data feed in the first place. So like with Chainlink, it's just getting to the point where you have an oracle for the thing that you wanted to build an oracle around, that you wanted to build a smart contract around. So from the point of view of a smart contract developer, how do they get data added to the Umbrella? Like, what's that process look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this was another area that we saw as a, current challenge in the market today because of the high costs of getting data on chain. Other oracles, sometimes make it difficult to add custom data, because for us, everything is added to a, just a broader Merkle tree with, almost unlimited number of leaves/nodes that we can kind of tack on. Adding any additional price feed becomes just a very simple exercise of adding essentially to that database that we then ultimately have to, roll up into kind of a root hash, unique root hash identifier onto a layer one. So because of that much easier and almost, free process, it's very easy for us to add additional data, add additional price feeds, for kind of whoever needs it. So, it's one of the ways that we feel like is another value add for various projects, particularly smaller projects that might be like, look, I just want my own price feed for my own token, which, is not a top 50 or a top 100 token. So, other oracles may say, look, it's going to take this much time. You're going to have to wait 6 months, 9 months, which apparently is currently, sometimes the wait list to even, get something listed through a Chainlink. But then on top of that is the incredibly high cost that's associated to even get that data on chain. And sometimes it just doesn't make any economic sense for certain projects to do that.
So, but how does a project practically do it? Like, what do they have to do to? Because, like, presumably you guys don't write all data in the world at the moment to your layer two, right?
So today we don't have like a self-service mechanism. Down the road, it's something that we have it's something that we like to do where we might be able to do it in a more self-service fashion. Today, it's just reaching out to our team and saying, we'd like to work with you. We want to get our price feed up and running. As long as we're able to pull that data, let's say it's a price feed of a mid-cap project, as long as we can get that data through, our various data sources, maybe it's one of our aggregators, maybe it's, we were directly integrated into Uniswap and, we can pull data from CoinGecko and other, exchange, data providers. Then we can add your data feed. Once we add it in, it becomes available, and we can start serving it to whichever kind of dApp is requesting it. So it's a fairly straightforward process, and we can get it done within 1-2 weeks.
Okay, and I suppose the other element of this is like I understand from the point of view of the data being written to the layer two and the Merkle root hash and all of that kind of stuff as being able to prove that that data was in fact what was written. But the other like difficult bit of the Oracle is making sure that the data itself is good. So like how does that happen?
So there's two parts to that. One is just ensuring that we have enough data sources. So we use a mixture of both premium aggregators that are themselves doing a certain level of data sanitation and verification checking, as well as direct integration into various, exchanges and marketplaces that provide data like a Uniswap. We then also have a community run, network of validators. Currently, we have 26 validators that are each independently pulling data from, our data sources, and verifying that and performing a consensus among the validators. And once that data is verified, it is then, only then that, the lead validator will then mint the block and write it on chain. So, we have kind of, several steps that are taken to try and ensure that not only is the data sources accurate, but we take a look at all the different pieces of data to ensure that the right one or the verified one is then ultimately written on chain.
Okay. Philip, what have you guys been seeing in terms of the kind of projects that are sort of taking up the Umbrella protocol at the moment?
I mean, right now we were still in development mode. So over the last few months, we've developed our multi-chain approach, which helps us write onto each chain individually. Before that, we had some technical limitations, which were which were due to replication soft architecture that we had. So we were depending on one blockchain. We couldn't replicate to all the other more often. So this is now we've just entered the phase of being able to provide very high frequency on specific chain without being linked to the mother chain, and we are in discussions with several projects to use the oracle. So those are some DeFi projects that either needed the deviation trigger that is offered by Chainlink. This is pretty much offered because of the cost, right? If you would ask them to write on chain every 10 seconds, that becomes very costly. So the way to minimize and to reduce that cost is done by this deviation threshold. And because due to our architecture, we cannot have a deviation threshold because we have 800 assets in the Merkle tree. So there will always be a deviation of a minimal deviation among all those data points. What we can do now is offer very high frequency on specific blockchains. And this actually covers, the need of the project that want to have, every 30-second update or so on and so forth. So we're just applying this now. We are in touch with some DeFi protocols that need very high frequency and that we couldn't offer before that. And we're also looking at some other type of projects which are very interesting, like a decentralized sports betting platform. They need data from sports data provider to just make sure that their protocol runs on it. And if you imagine you'd have let's say football data updated constantly, every single data point in those events will have to be written on chain. That doesn't make sense, like John said before, economically, financially, to have everything written on chain, and then just in case someone uses the dApp. So we're looking at those type of partnerships. Obviously, the bear market has been, affecting every single project. So it's a bit more challenging right now because people are holding on to their assets. But we do believe that we have a way to minimize costs on the project's finances, just because if they, we can offer some sort of flat rate and make sure that projects don't overpay in times of high fluctuations, because this deviation trigger would kind of, if there is high fluctuation, then you pay more often. So there are several projects, several layer ones as well that we're talking to integrate our tech into. And what John said is we're looking towards the future. So today we're pretty much using the price feeds for DeFi. Very few use, traditional finance data. But once blockchain reaches the next level and any other sort of large data sets are needed on chain, then this is where we think that we have a competitive advantage, just because we can make those data available. This type of data available on chain at an affordable cost.
Okay, understood. And from the point of view of like the wider possibilities of data on ledger, like the funny thing about all of this, I think sometimes is that in many ways, it's sort of boring backend technology, right? Like the whole crypto space is kind of just boring backend technology, but it's so exciting because of what it suddenly makes possible. It's the unlocking of those sort of like possibilities, and obviously, unlocking a huge amount of more verifiable data on Ledger introduces a bunch of interesting possibilities. But I'd be interested to understand what you think, John, is the most. What do you get most excited about in terms of the wider possibilities here?
I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of crazy is, to me at least, is just how early things are. Like I think with many technology disruptions across history, this kind of follows a similar curve, right? There's this early excitement and hype, followed by maybe the fact that realization that the tech isn't fully there yet. So there's this like drop in hype, but during that drop in hype, the real builders and kind of players in that ecosystem start to kind of create stuff, right? I mean, if you look at the internet boom and bust and then reboom, so to speak, initial infrastructure for internet probably started in the late 60s and 70s, right? But it didn't take until maybe the late 90s for some actual applications to start. And then the hype cycle started with the .com boom, where every company that changed their name to a .com could go IPO on the NASDAQ or stock market, and then there was a bust, because a lot of those companies that came out during that time, it was probably a little bit too early, and it wasn't until probably the late 2000s that truly utilitarian applications like Facebook didn't really take hold until 2008 or 2009, probably a good several decades after the initial technology came out. I mean, I think it's the same thing for, blockchain. Bitcoin white paper wasn't out until the late, like mid to late 2000s. So, if you look at it in the same cycle, we're super early. And it's the reason why, peers, you guys, and what we're doing, we're still building the plumbing, because, people are like, hey, how come, sure, DeFi sounds great, but if you look at dApp Radar, like, why is there so few transactions happening today? Well, it's because the infrastructure is still being built. We're still laying out the plumbing and the pipelines.
Right.
And until that part is done, you really can't scale. So, one of the things that we're trying to do is to help build some of that infrastructure so that you can get data at scale and inexpensively. Right. Because on that front, you look at, cellular and mobile, and what could you do with your Nokia phone back in, 1999 or 2001? Make a few phone calls and maybe send an SMS. But because the bandwidth was so low, there wasn't much data, you couldn't do much more than that simple functionality. Right. But once bandwidth started to explode and you had, 3G, 4G, and 5G, all of a sudden, look at where your smartphone is today. You pretty much can run your entire business and your whole life on your smartphone, partly because of the fact that you can get that data and you can do video conference calls and watch your Netflix and, do your finances and your trading and everything on your phone, because the infrastructure is there to allow you to do that. The apps are now being able to be built on top of that. But fundamentally, it's because the infrastructure is now there. The pipelines have been laid out that you can get data at scale and cheaply, where now people don't even know what carrier they. It's just like, hey, I have Wi-Fi.
Right.
Therefore, I can get my stuff done.
Right.
So hopefully, over the next 10 plus years, this will also follow suit. So I think it's incredibly invigorating to kind of be part of something so early stage, where hopefully we can all make an impact in changing the lives of billions of people by helping lay out some of this infrastructure that can then bring out that real revolution of the applications themselves that can then, impact people's lives. So for me, that's the most exciting thing and what gets me up in the morning.
So if you were like in the next, for the next cycle, for the next bull market, if you were going to place bets on what you think is going to be the key applications of your technology in applications on top of public ledgers, where would you be telling entrepreneurs, developers, people who are focusing on going, I'm going to build this thing, but I'm going to need this data, or even going the other way and saying this data is now available as a result of Umbrella, you guys should be thinking about looking at this area. Where do you think it's going to blow up next?
I mean, that's a great question. If I knew that, I probably, I'd probably be also, starting businesses in those areas, or be involved in those projects as well. But, to be honest, I think it may be almost inevitable that most things will start to move to the blockchain because it's just inherently superior to have a trustless, permissionless based
absolutely
system.
True. Absolutely true. Right. But like the thing is not if, it's when.
It's when.
But the
exactly.
key question is when. That's the question I'm asking, right? Is like
the
.com boom, you look back at the .com boom, many of those companies weren't wrong, they were just early. So this is the main problem to parse right now is like, what do you think is going to hit off next? Not like, is everything going to go? Yeah, of course it is. But what do you think is going to go off next? What are you most excited about? What do you think is closest?
I think just because I think DeFi, for example, or just eventually just finance, right, is going to move to the blockchain because one, there's already enough, test cases of it happening and people are starting to get not necessarily used to, but at least, enough of a critical mass of people have started to utilize, blockchain based, finance that it'll start to continue to expand. And it won't be just, purely native DeFi applications. It'll be some of these institutions, right? So it's part of the reason why we have been focusing on expanding a lot of data across, like traditional finance, stock quotes and stock option derivative pricing feeds, like that stuff we're already building out. So we see personally, I see kind of further evolution on that front, just because it's already kind of gone out to market and DeFi has already kind of taken somewhat of a foothold over the last 2 to 3 years. The second area that I personally think is going to be more critical to like broader mass adoption is on the gaming side, just because, there's millions of people who do finance, but there's billions of people who play games. So on that front, whether that's, being able to, store customized gaming session data on chain so that, you can, further power the esports, genre on chain, or, further leveraging kind of, verifiable random number generation to be able to power blockchain or Web3 based games. Those areas I see as the next kind of wave of applications on the blockchain that are going to help to drive mass adoption. Are those going to be the biggest industries? Who knows, right? Because, healthcare and just, public-private data, things that have to do with, political or even legal document. I mean, all those areas can be fully, revolutionized using blockchain tech and, various types of, whether you want to call it smart contracts or other things that can be leveraged, right? So I feel like it's, like you said, it's a matter of when, not if. But, I think finance and gaming are probably the next two big areas that are going to see, and that we're already starting to see kind of early stage innovation and hopefully eventually broader based adoption.
Interesting. And Philippe, you mentioned sports betting. Do you think sports betting is going to get big on Ledger as well?
I mean, not only sports betting. I mean, any sort of, platforms that have been built in Web 2 have the potential to go to Web 3 if it's done correctly. I also see, sports betting is a bit complex just because of the real time data. So you could have sports betting beforehand, all these betting odds before the game. In-game data is a bit more challenging just because running consensus takes time sometimes. So you always have a lag there. But what I see also very interesting as a use case is insurance. If you can get insurance smart contracts, a large insurance company starting to build their insurance contracts based on data. I don't know, the typical example of the farmer that wants to insure his crop from weather conditions. Today we cannot know what next summer is going to look like. This summer was very hot, but if those companies can start building their insurance contracts based on weather data that we could bring on chain, humidity, rainfall, whatever within a specific area. Then it could be automated, which means on the company's side they would have lower overheads. Why? Because they don't need to go and have a person verifying the data, having the claim. So it could all be automated. So in a way, there is a trade-off for them. It could be automated. They have lower costs, and the farmer could know that the payout will be automatic if the conditions are met, which is based on data. It's not, that's kind of in my head. I don't see it happening yet, but those are the type of things that I think will move, which the industry will move towards very soon. And on top of that, also some sort of real fi that could take over. As the next step to DeFi, but for that you need data as well. So,
that's super interesting. So, it's been such a pleasure having both of you guys on the show, and so interesting to hear about Umbrella Protocol more. If people want to find out more about Umbrella Protocol, get involved, or ask you guys to integrate some data feed for their dApps, where should they go? How should they get started?
So people can join or at least visit our website at umb.network. We've got our Twitter page at again UMB Network that they can follow. We've got 50 some odd thousand followers and a pretty welcoming and open community. We've got our Telegram chat channel, our Medium blogs with a lot of informative articles about our protocol, about our community, about kind of various applications that we can help to support. All that can be accessed through our website. Philippe, I don't know if there's additional information with regard to reaching out to us for any business development opportunities that you can provide.
Usually you can either contact us on Telegram or on Discord, and you'll be forwarded to me. My Telegram handle is just Engels_UMB. And anyone who reaches out, I contact back very quickly.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show, and looking forward to seeing more from Umbrella Protocol soon.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks for having us.
You better call on these guys. I'm going radical, I'm going Radix, I'm going radical, I'm going Radix. Hyperspeed DeFi, never on a decline. Building the future, I feel like a savage.